Welcome to Trust the Journey, Episode 2. I'm Melanie Curtis.
And I'm Jason Maletsky.
Our mission is to live, laugh, love, and learn together with you.
We're here to create conscious connections, to grow and contribute through our practice of openness, honesty, vulnerability, humility, and trust. Trusting the entire journey.
In this episode, we're talking about fear, choices, deciding through those feelings, and how walking the Appalachian Trail actually is a pretty powerful metaphor on this topic.
As always, if you get value from the show, please share whenever and however you're so inspired.
Thank you so much for being with us, guys. Here we go, Episode 2. So go for it. What makes you want to talk about the fear stuff first?
I think the reason why this one jumps up on me, fear being the relevant topic, it's kind of the underlier to all things. I've been a fan of Brian Germain for a long time, and I've heard his methodology that he's preached for many years about every decision, every action being based in the concept of love or fear.
Yeah.
And it rings true with me in the sense that the world is a place of polarity. The life that we live is one of everything being polaric, right? We are awake or we're sleeping, we're alive or we're dead. It's day or it's night,
Right.
Everything being balanced and opposite. And I think that concept of fear, like it being a study, I think that it's it's the underlier to our choices as people would call adrenaline junkies.
Yeah.
To the risk taker, to the people, the type of choices that we make that are based to do around doing things that are going to intentionally put ourselves in a state where we're going to have some fear to overcome. We're going to have to deal with being afraid. So I think it's been relevant for me in a large part of my life. And when I find myself backed into a corner or trying to figure out what's the next move in my life, where am I goal, it almost always comes back down to this rationale of what am I afraid of?
Yeah.
Where's my choices?
Such a useful question, because it doesn't really matter. Like if I think about, I agree with the polarity. I mean, not that it matters to agree or disagree, but meaning like I tend to reflect a lot on the balance. Like, for example, even like, and this is sort of a weird example, but like I've often said in personal growth and like happiness versus like that there's often this other side, of people working through something really big, so if you have these big like happiness spikes, there's often like the juxtaposed like pain point that people are working on, so when people are like, how are you so happy all the time, I'm like, well, I'm not, but I'm also like really working through the stuff that if ever it keeps me at a pain point. And the reason I think that's relevant to fear is that every time I release some of the fear that's in the pain point, I'm released into the higher happiness, like less, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like
Totally.
that balance, I've come to like respect that and go, okay, cool. Like, that's all right. There's a balance here. There's no like, oh, I have to overcome all my fears all the time. I've found that in my growth, like my own growth, it's like I have intentionally gone into that feeling on purpose and started to recognize the fear feeling as opportunity. So like that frame around fear, I can slowly and consistently change that from like, I'm kind of fucking it up because I feel this way, to, oh, this is great. This is an opportunity for a breakthrough. Like when you're saying, oh, when I feel I backed into a corner, like what is my choice here? And that I think is so awesome and powerful, because it's not that we don't feel the fear or feel pain or feel whatever. It's that for me, I'm like, I kind of almost get excited when I find myself struggling, because I'm like, oh, I have a breakthrough available here. What is it? I don't know if that makes sense or
Yeah.
resonates with you.
Yeah, there's a bunch of things that you mentioned there that immediately bring thoughts to mind, and have similarities or situations that I can relate to, and that I would reference in my own life. And you started touching on how when people seem to be very outwardly happy, that you're like, how can you be that way all the time? And we know that it's just not true. Very
Right.
often there is that exact polar opposite of just depression or retreat, introversion, things that are just closed down and recharge,
Yeah.
and find and having to deal with those personal challenges. I can even think of a time where I really felt like I got to a point in my life when I was having an amazing time. Like, I didn't think life had the potentiality to be so much fun. Like, it was so much fun. I was having this extended run of fun. It was like I had gotten on a rocket ship that launched into space, and it just was just heading for orbit and on this high cruise over orbit. And I'm like, wow, look at it from up here. And I went, oh no, this is really, really, really high. There's only one way from here. It's going to go back down. And I had this fear sensation, even though that everything was perfect, that at some point that this ecstatic, euphoric period in life was going to have its reversal, and I was going to have the other side of that wave. And I didn't know when or how it would come, but I knew inside that you can't sustain any state.
Mm,
Nothing is permanent, right? Everything is in a constant state of change. So this, just the understanding that I was having that much fun was terrifying.
yeah.
And
Oh,
it's
so
oh,
fascinating.
so
It's funny.
frustrating.
Yeah. I have a similar story about that feeling. It was 2000. I want to say it was 2000. I want to say it was 2008, 7, maybe
Yeah.
7. It was when Jonathan and I were living together. And
Mhm.
Jonathan, just so people know, is Jay's old teammate who's no longer with us, but we love. So we were basically in this personal growth period, and I was always bounce stuff off him and stuff. And I read, like, I did this social experiment on myself.
Those are fun.
It's true. Like, it was intense and weird. And I was like, because it was in the realm of dating and stuff like that. You get really blocked and nervous and insecure if you're wired that way. And I definitely was. And so I basically said, I'm not dating anyone anymore. I'm going to just be completely honest with everybody to an intense degree. And I was like crazy about it, because I didn't know how to do the whole, like, how to figure out my own insecurities back then. And so I was reading these books, and I was doing these experiments, and it was so leading to legitimate, deeper connections, because I was being legitimately real, and I was not attached to any outcome or anything like that. And so anyway, as a result of that, I started to feel really free from the fear of certain outcomes. Like, it was a very general feeling, because it wasn't like just dating. It was like everything. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I had at that time sort of achieved this thing. Cause I'm like, it's been going so long. I feel fucking amazing. Like, whoa. And then inevitably, you have the return of the life sine wave, as we've already touched on. And in that experience, I had to deal with, and I was confused again, like, fuck, I thought I had it figured out. Like, it's just, you find and you're happy all the time. And so it's like, that's just not the case. And I'm so grateful for that lesson and that experience, because I know I can achieve prolonged, periods of peace and happiness and self, contentment and all that stuff, But anyway, it was just a piece of like my education in terms of what I can do to source those feelings and what matters to me. Why did that work so well for me? Yada, yada, yada.
It's funny, I was going through a wave yesterday. I was feeling like the things that just the day before I was so enthusiastic about felt really meaningless and felt really hollow. And I was losing my motivation was tanking, that some of the efforts that I've been putting towards some projects that I feel really good in my heart about, things that I'm very excited about, that I'm internally driven to do without no external push. There's no resources, there's no money coming, there's no nothing. It's just, I'm excited to do it because I want to see it succeed. I started doubting them, and I started having this feelings like, maybe this isn't the way, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, or the people that I'm involved with, the events, the energy, the intention, all this stuff is like, is this the wrong deal? And and then I know I'm listening to myself, and like I'm observing my own internal narrative, and I'm like, why am I not enjoying something, emotionally, that's the day before I was doing enthusiastically with no external drivers? And I think that it's just that there is this element of phase shift, of there is this positive negative that we
Yeah.
just go through. I mean, we breathe in, we breathe out. They're just opposites of each other all the time, and the heart is just, at one point it's pushing, and then another point it's pulling, and it's those in betweens when we feel the doubt,
Yeah.
when we're questioning our choice, when we're not sure about the decisions that we're making in our lives, or how we feel about something. And I think that's the time when we have to just learn to roll with it, like we've got to just be like, all right, well, just let this moment go by, and I'll just let my mind focus on something maybe either right in front of me, like a right now thing that I can put my attention towards. Even if it's just this very moment, like I'll sip on my coffee for a second and my mind
Yeah.
will drift into my presence of now, or I'll let my mind go further ahead to something much further down the road, and I'll start thinking, yeah, I wasn't feeling good about this stuff that I was thinking about today, but yeah, there's this thing in a few months that I'm pretty stoked about, and I'll just kind of let my mind get on either side of the problem,
Yeah.
and so my mental choice comes down to, what area do you focus on? Like, what is the place where your attention is put to? And then that drives your emotional state. It
Hmm.
resets. I'm really having fun lately observing this biocomputer that we live in, and watching
Yeah.
how it works. And had a great experience this past weekend with a long-term student of mine. He's back in town for a few days of intense coaching, and watching the emotional state drive the physical action, right? Where we
Yeah.
start feeling a certain way, and so we start performing a certain way. And then mentally being able to observe that emotional state happen. You're like, oh, look, I'm actually getting all huffy puffy because I'm tired, or I'm hungry, or I'm frazzled, or whatever just happened threw me off guard. And if you're able to actually see yourself being huffy puffy from outside, and you go, that's not actually why I came here or what I want to be doing. Let
Hmm.
me just turn the mental switch to, I actually came here to focus and be productive and to get things done and to achieve my goals. And then you take
Yeah.
a big breath and reset that part of self. And then, the next thing you know, your physical state is following your mental state, and you're able to get the end result that you're looking for, even if you didn't feel that during the time when it was happening that you were actually on track or focused or in control of, all the different pieces that were going on. We're very often a passenger to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's such a good thing to bring up, because I feel like it can go both ways. I actually did a Facebook Live yesterday about just sort of a general tip, like a specific tip rather, on uh, willpower and how to strengthen it.
Mhm.
Because, and to give you the short recap of that, what I spoke to was, how do you strengthen your willpower, is that you take what you don't want to do and you connect it to what you do want to do. So whether that's a value, so this is more the mental, like
Mhm.
juxtaposition of what you just said. But like when you also are like, oh, my physical body, and I've done this for Facebook Live, this is sort of a thing I'm working on, because I feel the public speaking fear come up in my body, in my
Yeah.
physical body, when I'm doing those Facebook Lives. I
Yeah.
feel like, oh, there is potential that thousands of people could be watching me, you know, over the course of a week or whatever, but it's out there, you know? So there's that physical feeling, that tension in my chest that arises. And so I've been working with that and going, okay, some days I've gone for a walk outside because I'm like, okay, I just need to chemically alter my body
Mhm.
by going and getting some endorphins and, you know, get myself sort of to balance out and like decrease that fear response in me. Excuse me. And another way that I feel like we can do that in terms of making choices is in like discerning in those moments when we're doubting and when we're going, oh, I just don't want to do this, or we're unclear, is that idea of like, well, what do I want to do? What does, like you mentioned, this is something I'm sure I want to do, whether it's a value. So for me, I reflected on being out and why do I continue to do Facebook Live if they torture me?
Yeah.
What's that all about, you know? Well, it's because I've reflected and made the choice that to me, that I believe in courage as leadership, that I believe in courage as contribution. And for me, as given how I feel doing Facebook Lives, it's absolutely an example of that. So I'm like, no matter how I do, I'm doing something good as a result of it being connected to that value for me. You know what I mean? So like, anyway, I'm sort of rambling, but both sides I feel like are relevant to this idea of how do we make a choice when we feel that way, or when we feel the fear of uncertainty as well.
You know, it's really interesting. I'm hearing some of the things there that have been kind of bubbling around in my head, you know, this fear, choices and decisions kind of complex, you know, where you're like, all right, well, I'm afraid to make a choice, I'm afraid to make an action, or I don't feel confident is another way to say that. I haven't
True.
come to a place of confidence yet where I'm ready to move forward with something, or you have made a choice and now you're having to follow through with it, you know, and you're having to put yourself in front of that audience or whatever it may be. And stay the course, right? Like that's the thing, is like not backing down. I had this really interesting fear pop up the other day, and I wanted to retreat, you know, like part of me wanted to give up on the goal that I had set for myself, even though I'd had the goal in place for years. It
Yep.
really is not that big of a goal. It was actually something pretty easy to do. It's just a matter of following through and setting the time and the money aside and just doing it. And I mean, thousands of millions of people do it all the time. It's not even that hard. But I got a little afraid, you know? And when I had the fear getting under my skin, it started creating self doubt. And it started creating doubt to the point where I didn't know, question whether I wanted to through on the goal. And when I heard my own, you know, little nagging voice in the back of your head that, so maybe you can just say we don't feel like doing the rest of this, you know, we can
Hmm.
just say I changed my mind, you
Yeah.
know.
Which
and
is
and
valid in some
yeah,
cases, for
sure,
sure.
sure, you know, sometimes you definitely change your mind and you're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
can be great. But you know, when I heard it this time, I knew that I was only saying it because I was afraid,
Right.
because I didn't like the experience of fear. I didn't like the feeling of not having footing or traction, not feeling stable in my decision. And that when I had that self doubt in there, I felt like I had potential for failure. And that failure means that in this case, there's actually potential for physical harm. You know, I could get hurt. You know, if I fail, I could get hurt. And so the fear of getting hurt becomes the underlying piece. But when I realize is like, am I going to feel better if I try and get hurt? Or am I going to feel worse if I just quit and go home and never try?
Yeah.
I think that,
Great question.
right? Like that's the
That's a
one.
really good question, especially when we're talking about physical sports. Like for our community, I imagine skydivers will be watching this,
Yep.
and so I imagine, whomever finds this more widely, perhaps could be involved in physical sports such that that very specific, reflection will be very relevant. So anyway, say more if you have more.
No, I guess, I mean, what was really drawing me to is this, it's the back to this concept of making a decision and then remembering why you made the decision. So when I came to the point of overcoming that nagging voice, that little creeping doubt, it's doubt, that's the word, that doubt starts to come up, bubbling up from inside. It's somewhere like, I feel like it's back here. It's like creeping up your back, like the monkey on the back snare. It's like I kind of have to look over my shoulder and be like, who's that talking? You know? I get that doubt. And then I ask myself, I have to remind myself, I have to put in place a system of reminders to keep myself on track. So I'm a list maker. What
Hmm.
I do is I write down the things that are important to me so that I can remember them later, because
Yeah.
I forget. And like I feel like everything is so forgetful all the time. There's so much going on. And at least I don't know about you, but my mind goes like a million miles an hour. And the back of it where everything's supposed to land and supposed to catch, it's like a sieve. Almost,
Yeah,
almost everything
exactly.
goes right through the other side, you know?
I think that's a very common experience and feeling for any creative person. I think everybody in the world, there's a part of me that really believes everybody in the world is a creative person, whether you identify with that or not, whether you're an artist, I don't think it needs to be labeled as such. Like the general term of creative, I feel like, especially for people who identify with that, I feel like you just described a very common feeling and experience, at least for me, for sure. I definitely have to write shit down. Are you kidding me? I posted I deliberately write like my 2018, my annual goals, because that long term of a timeline for me would totally get lost.
Oh yeah.
100%. If I
Oh
don't
my
look at
gosh.
that list and read it periodically, I will totally forget those goals. And it's not that I definitely will forget them. It's that I will be at risk of forgetting them. And since I care about not forgetting them, I care about following through on them over the course of a long-term timeline, I have to have them in my face to keep them top of mind. Otherwise, you're right. They're out in the back of the sieve, and who knows if they get caught or not.
It's interesting, I was for about 12 years member of the Performance Designs factory team, right? PD factory team. And during that time, we would have an annual retreat every year. So it started off as simple gets, right? You got a few guys that decided to partner up and they're going to make a team. And we don't even have goals. We're just going to figure out what we're going to do, and we're going to create some communal goals. And we start out literally sitting around a bonfire, camping, baseline zero, right? We're just creating, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that. And so we have this annual retreat where we started off in the woods around a bonfire, and it's progressed over the years to, all kinds of different locations and circumstance planning sessions. But this annual time where we regroup and we review the year, and we talk about everything that we said we were going to do the year before and how all the plans worked out, and then talk about how each of us, we review individual goals that we wrote down. Like we sat and we're like, okay, what are your goals for this year, right? And then what are the team's goals for this year? And then we review each person's openly on the floor and see how well each of us did individually and as a group. And then we talk about kind of presently how we're feeling having done that, and what our circumstance is now. And are we the same? Do we want to repeat, build on, move in other directions? Like, what are the
Yeah.
things that are now interesting to us? And start talking about our current state of being, and then start laying out goals for the next year. And I wasn't so much, I guess, conscious of the long-term repercussions of that process, but to do that for 12 years in a row, and that it becomes so habitual, so ingrained in your own personal culture that, oh yeah, every year I'm going to sit down around this time of year, end of year, December, January kind of time. And we're going to review how well things have gone. And I've started to build in this process of self-recognition of, wow, I really do accomplish the things that I've set out for. Or when I recognized that I had said something I thought something was a goal, when it really wasn't, how things prioritize themselves to become,
Yeah.
you're like, actually, this was the one that was important to me. This was moderately important. And this really wasn't that important at all. So I removed it from the list, and
Yep.
such a powerful process. And a huge piece is I left the team a couple of years ago, injury, life change, getting to middle age and having other goals,
Other
other
goals.
things
Yeah.
happening, right?
Mhm.
And then losing participation in that process, no longer being involved in it. I also realized that even though I continue to have a list of life goals, of things that I'm always working on and things that I'm trying to create for myself, it had lost some of the clarity, the definition, the things that help me, because I can't go back a year later and say, open up the document and review it, especially with your peers present,
Yeah.
and have that presence to go through. If you do this in a state where somebody else is doing the note keeping,
Yeah.
I say, okay, these are my goals, and you write them down. You write them down differently than if I say them.
Very true. Very true.
And so it's interesting to hear them stated back to you from somebody else's ear, when somebody else is
Yeah. Well,
saying it.
it's so fascinating because that is, I mean, that's essentially in a lot of ways what I do as a life coach is taking that kind of process.
Yep.
And it's like, who does, that's the thing. We don't typically do that for ourselves as individuals. It's not culturally, or hasn't historically been culturally, a thing to have a teammate for your life.
Yeah.
That's how I describe it to clients, is that, or people who are considering working with me, is that, like, that's how I frame it. Because not every life coach is the same. Whatever life coach, again, that term is weird. But my point is I look at it as like, we're a teammate. We're a team for your goals, whatever those are, whatever list that is. So that's kind of how I frame it to people. And people who resonate with that type of process usually end up working with me, because it's a thing, right? You've had 12 years of an experience of, like, this is a process, debriefing myself, like consciously setting goals, consciously holding myself accountable, consciously working with other people over a long term. Like, that is such powerful stuff. And it doesn't, and I'm saying this just for the people listening, watching, is that it doesn't have to be a life coach. It can be any form. Like, I am curious to hear how you've then reconciled that, not having your teammates. Like, how do you actually make that work for yourself now that you don't have those teammates? Or are you in the process of figuring that out for yourself?
It's a bit interesting, because I recognize that I lost that, and that I no longer had that kind of somebody else holding me by sharing it in a group setting. I have somebody else holding me accountable. I've made myself
Totally.
accountable to what I said, and I like to live up to my word. If I say something, I hopefully said it because I really meant it. I'm much like yourself. I did the social experiment of honesty, and I've never stopped.
I
It
know, me
never
either.
went away.
I'm like, okay, I don't need to share everything, but everything I do share is going to be 100% real.
Yeah. So now I feel like, especially that it's very transitionary time for myself to have, like, leaving a big piece of life and moving into another state of being, that I've become more cognizant in taking the responsibility on for myself. So there's two different ways that I've started taking over the responsibility. And that's, one is in list making in a structured form,
Yep.
which is I'll use my phone and my computer, and I'll use note-taking apps, and I'll write kind of a running hierarchy of things that I'm working on. So I'll have my key projects, like around the house, or my work project, or whatever upcoming project, like what we're working on.
Yep.
And they'll get a header, and then I'll have a sub list underneath that header of key things that are, in in my mind.
Yeah.
Anything that pops up. And if it's a large priority, it might get bolder type or top of the list or circled. I know if it's a lower priority, it sits on the list for a while and maybe
Yep.
eventually gets deleted.
Right.
And then the other two things that I do is I use the calendar, rampantly use the calendar. The calendar is like my driving motivator. It keeps me on track. It's that thing that helps me to know when and I need to get things done by. And
Yeah.
I know these are my choices that I don't need to get them done. I've
Hmm.
chosen to get them done.
Yeah.
I've made decisions that I'm going to reach my goal. And if I want to reach my goal, I have to do all the things on my list to get to where I'm going. At least I think so.
Right.
And so
That's the guess.
yeah,
The
so
educated guess. Yeah.
the two things work well with each other, right? You're like, oh, okay, I've got some ideas of what I want to do. I write them down, and then I go, well, when and where and how might that happen? And then I throw them on the calendar, and then I start building in both directions from each other. You know, the calendar
Yep.
date drives what needs to get done, and then the goal drives when and how where that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then it's just the grind, you know, the day to
Yeah.
day. You know, you get distracted, you forget, you start doing other things, and you got all this stuff going on. You need groceries, and the car needs fixing. And and you're
Exactly.
like, what were my goals again? Or do I even want to do this
I
anymore?
Yeah, and that's like when structure sort of comes into support us through. And it's funny, like something I was thinking of when you were sharing before was like, what does get us through? So like that structure of organization, I think absolutely is a key part of diffusing the fear of the unknown. Certainly, we have to continuously practice detachment from the outcome because, like you said, I think it's what's going to get me to my goal. That implies that, of course, we don't know the future. We can't predict it. We can't predict the outcome. Shit happens all the time. Life's totally unpredictable like that. Totally cool. Noted. But I think organizational process helps us take away that fear of the unknown or that fear of like feeling out of control, you know? Like it helps us sort of control and see something that's understandable and trustable in a sense amidst all of the complete chaos that it might be if we let our mind just go. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that's a bad thing to let our mind just go at all. I think that's a great thing too. If we go back to the balance. But stay with me for a second. So the other thing I wanted to talk about or mention was when we're deciding to do something that initiates fear in us, something that has always worked for me, and not always, that's not true, but like something I've earned over the course of my experience, right? Like is trusting my own capability of like this genuine, because I have consistently earned evidence that I have taken risks and survived them, you know, have survived them. I've always found a way because I'm still here and I'm fine. I'm good. You know what I mean? I'm not dead. I'm not whatever. I can trust that no matter what happens, I am resourceful enough. I'm capable of taking what comes to me and getting through it, no matter what that is. And I think that really only comes from people going through a lot of life experiences that are really scary and that are really challenging. It reminds me of a story. This is the last thing I'll share about this, but like back when I was like 24, one of my friends, I was upset about something, no clue what it was. I was all up in arms about something. It was probably work related, who knows, doesn't matter. The fact that I don't remember is actually relevant to the story.
Very,
you know?
yeah.
I was totally upset about it. I was like, oh, and my friend said to me, he's like, the only reason you're upset is because nothing has happened to you yet. Like nothing bad has ever happened to you yet, you know, like, and I remember feeling so like mad at him being like, fuck you. Like this is real upset, you know? And of course at that point in time, it's totally valid. All the feelings are valid. I often reflect on that piece of of mirrored advice from someone older, and a person who genuinely cares about me, who is my friend, who has my best interests at mind or whatever. And he said, well, nothing bad's ever happened to you, you know? And I say that with love, because now that like bad things have happened, I feel like I've been through more significant life challenges. I get that. I get why he said that. And
Yeah.
that underpins why I feel so capable in my life now. Why I'm less afraid is the point.
Yeah. It's interesting. This, you know, everything that we experience in our life builds our character, right? Like I think about our life as a circle, and it starts off like a point, right? Like we have no experience. We just this individual, outward looking, no concept of reality. And the more we live, the more we fill up this circle with more and more and more life experience. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we have a better and better ability to look back across our own experience. And everything we do and everything we see, say, hear, it's all a relationship to our point of view, right? Like we never experience anything from any other point of view than our own.
Yeah.
As much as we might hear it through somebody else's experience, it's still us experiencing their experience. So
100%.
it has to come through our filter.
Yep.
And as life matures, as we continue onward, that pool of experience grows, it gets bigger and bigger. We have a greater and greater perspective that we could not have possibly had at a younger time, you know.
Agreed.
It's very, very relevant to me to see as a middle-aged person now that I look back at my younger self and I hear the older guy walking by and saying, it's giving me a life lesson and saying, son, when you're older, you're going to regret that, you know? And I go, what are you talking about, old man? I feel great,
I know, exactly.
And then
I know everything. I have it all figured out. I know what's up.
Right? And then you get older and then you're like, oh, he was right. I totally get it now.
Yeah.
You know? And you can't have had the presence of mind, the ability to observe from that point of view until you've expanded to that place, you know, so you personally got there. And I guess what I wanted to kind of come back around on this little jaunt into just observation is it's a process, right? And sometimes I'm very much one of these people who visions an idea. I'm like, okay, here's what I'd like to do. Oh, this would be great. I can see it now. Here's the scene, right? Here's the end game. I can see the total end state of how it would look when it's all done. And it's got to be like, what, 1 or 2 steps between here and there? Right? So, yeah, I'll just imagine the end and I'll figure out the in between as it goes. You know, and as long as I know what the end looks like, I'll just keep kind of filling in the blocks, you know, like color by numbers, you know, kind of thing. I'll just keep adding pieces. And you can't know what all the pieces are ever. They're going to get you there. But the more times that you do that, the more times that you at least try, you're like, okay, here's my end state, my goal, what I want to achieve. And here's where I am. And maybe I don't know all the steps in between. But if I start writing them down, I start with, you know, at least like see a few recognition of things that might have to happen to get there, and then some subgroups of things inside of those, and then what I get is individual steps. And so I'll use my analogy from through hiking, from the Appalachian Trail, because it's a very powerful process, because it's so simplistic in nature of simply I'm walking from here to here. This is my goal. I'm going to cover this distance. All I have to do is walk from there to there. So in its essence, this is very simple. It's about as simple as it gets, but it's quite complex with all the intricacies, with do I turn left here or do I turn right here? Is now the time to stop and rest, or is now the time to push on forward? Should I make a decision to get more supplies or refuel on water or whatever? I'm like, there's all these little things along the way that we will encounter as part of that process. In the end, when you break it down, when you get down to the meat and potatoes of this, we have either end of the spectrum. I go, okay, my goal is from A to B. But the reality is all I need to do is take each of the next steps that are right in front of me. There's
Yep.
only there's only the next step. And even if the next step doesn't feel like I'm super sure about it, as long as I make a step, I'm moving towards that goal. And a
Hmm.
lot of the time, it may feel like the goal is infinitely distant and I have
Yeah.
no relationship to it, or that
Correct.
the step that I'm taking is in the wrong direction, or that I may be going backwards,
Yeah.
or that it's a fruitless endeavor. But the only thing that is actually taking you away from your goal is not taking a step.
I agree. It's fascinating to think about, like, because it's so understandable, right? That people would be like, well, I don't want to take a step in the excuse me, I don't want to take a step in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I don't want to take a step backwards. Like, I want to guarantee that I'm taking a step in the right direction. And so working around and creating a reframe around that. And it's like, if we don't know the way to go, like, yeah, sometimes the step in the right direction or the action to take is that conscious reflection of connection to that bigger goal. Because maybe we have been down here for too long, and a little bit of like, am I, like, let's
Hmm.
reflect. Okay, I've reflected and I still don't know what to do. I still am not sure if the step is going to be forward in the direction of my goal. So a lot of times I'll work with people, and this is for myself too, framing that the action at all will deliver us new evidence to support whatever we're going to do. So if we take a step and we recognize, oh shit, that was backwards. Now we know it was backwards. So
Yep.
it's always a step in the right direction. It's always furthering us toward our goal, because if we just stood there and waited till we were sure, we'll never do anything. And that is a great tragedy I see all around people who they are stuck in inaction. It's like one of my, if I can help anyone feel, safe enough to take an action, that they're not going to fail, that they actually are doing a great thing for themselves, just doing something when they don't know, like, oh, that's just a big, big deal. I feel like that's a lot of how I've gotten through fear in my own life.
You made me think about the infinite value of time in the statement that you just mentioned. When we're in that state of indecision, when we're afraid of taking a step, we're afraid of making a wrong move,
Hmm.
then we're letting the most precious commodity that we're ever going to have in our life
Yeah.
whittle away, right?
Yeah.
Time.
Agreed.
Right? Time is the one, because it's the one that is guaranteed to be um, limited. There is only so much you're going to get, and as you get older, as you start recognizing the infinite value of time
Yeah.
and how precious it is, and how you choose to allow it to go, I'm very much on board with what you just said. I've become the comfortable with making the wrong choice. I'm excited to let's do something wrong,
I'll
so that I
learn.
know what wrong is, so that I can do something else, and hopefully that's also not wrong.
Totally.
And then I can start saying, okay, these are all wrong, so let's try this one. At least we're
Exactly.
making choices and decisions.
If you think about people that you respect and admire who have fucked up gloriously, but they've been doing it in the, with the intention of trying, and it doesn't even have to be for some big goal for humanity or contribution. I say that a lot because I believe in that personally. That motivates me to, a high degree. But like, it doesn't, just somebody that tries, like that. There's rampant stories of that kind of thing, and that inspires us because of that very period that very experience we all find ourselves in at times. So like, when we see it possible that, oh, you know what, at least he tried, at least she went for it, you know what I mean? Like, so few people care about the outcome, and we often get afraid that we will be looked at poorly because of the outcome. Like that's a big part of the Facebook Live fear for me. Is it like, what? Oh, if I put out some shitty content, then people won't respect me anymore and my life coaching business will fail and I'll have no food on the table. And you know what I mean? Like obviously
Totally.
don't really get caught up in that, but at its base core, that stuff comes up. And so consistently reminding myself that, you know what? No way. If I'm out there and I'm trying, how many people sit on the other side of their laptop and don't do anything? And it's not that that's wrong or bad. It's just that when we talk about time being precious and life being precious, if sitting on the other side of the computer hurts your heart, that hurts my heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that's like really making you happy, then awesome. You know, but for me, it's like the being willing to try after something, and mine just happens to involve the fucking internet. My point is, you know, like
Totally.
those stories inspire us. So
I'm gonna go back to one of my favorite words, and it's decision. When I make a decision, when I decide, when I've come to a place in my mind where I've made a choice, I've gone and said, this is what I want to have happen in my life. And this can be any number of things, right? Like I can be setting a goal for myself, something I want to achieve, or something I no longer want to do. You know,
yeah,
I can be removing something from my life, or I can be adding something, but removing something is always is adding something in essence, right? It's the exact, you're giving yourself space that you didn't
yeah,
have because it was filled with something negative, right? Something that you didn't want in your life. So by getting that, by making the choice to remove that, you've added in space and freedom and the growth potential that we were talking about earlier for us to now bubble into this state of happiness or presence or room to just be okay, you
yeah,
know? I'm going to talk about one that's it touched me really. It was a pain point for a long time. It's just cigarettes. I smoked
yeah,
cigarettes for a long time. They were horrible, murderous thing that I did to myself for a very, very long time.
yeah,
It was cultural. I grew up in a place where that's normal.
yeah,
Everybody does it. You know, parents, children, everybody participates. It's
yeah,
so society. We just sit around. We enjoy this. We enjoy this thing that, you know, that I hate.
yeah,
I never enjoyed it. I made myself think that I enjoyed it so that I wouldn't hate myself for doing it. But I
yeah,
really hated myself for doing it. And it took a lot of overcoming some of the lies that had been told to me for a very long time to come to a place where I was okay with everything. And the lie that I was told was that quitting smoking is hard, you know,
yeah,
because
yeah.
this is where like, oh man, this is really hard. And the reality is that's a total lie.
I
It's
love
not
that.
hard at all. It's actually the easiest, it's easier than continuing to do it.
Oh,
It's
so
it's
awesome.
it's easier to stop doing something than it is to continue doing something.
Hmm.
By not smoking, you just don't do that. You just don't. There's just you're just not participating in this process anymore. By actually doing it, it's a lot more work. You got to go, you got to buy these things, you got to go through this process, you got to deal with this, breathing this and smelling this and tasting this, and none of it's pleasant in any way, shape. It's a very painful process that you put yourself. We feel as we're trapped. We feel as
Yeah,
though we're unable to get out of this barrier that we've created around ourselves. But when you truly make the choice, and I know that anybody who's listening to this, everybody who's out there right now who has ever quit
yeah,
smoking, drinking, whatever addiction you might have had for yourself that you believed at the time to be something difficult to overcome. When you passed the crux, when you went to the other side of choice and
yeah,
made the decision for yourself that this is something that you no longer wish to continue repeating, then the choice was actually really easy. The
yeah,
action that follows it is incredibly light and free and simple, and it doesn't have any of that weight that was before the decision.
Yep.
Before the decision, it feels like this massive mountain to climb that you may never make it to the top, and that it's just an impossible obstacle to overcome. But
Yep.
in reality, it's simply a flip of a switch inside your own head, and the mountain disappears,
So
and
good.
it does never existed in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You know what's funny? What that makes me think of, it's relevant to what I just shared, is that fear of like rejection. And for me, being a person that is sort of out there, I've consistently faced that fear. And I was just reflecting on this like a couple of weeks ago, something like that. But basically, because I've been in this process of like, well, how much do I want to be seen? Really up against the mindset
Yeah.
that if I'm out there in the world, you know, being like going and being a public speaker and this and that, I had a consistent like pain point around, well, I don't want people to think I'm just out there going, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. Like I was very fearful of that, very
Me
fearful of
too.
that,
Me too. Yeah.
because I'm like, oh my God. Because just to speak also to what I just said about, you know, sitting behind the internet and stuff like that. But like I spend a lot of time doing introverted things, a lot. And so I've been reflecting on that going like, is this fear like keeping me from doing less out in the world, or is this the balance that I need in order to show up bright and radiant when I am engaging with other people, whether it's in this format, whether it's out in New York City, whether it's out in Los Angeles, whatever, right? So I'm in this process of reflecting on that, and I feel like I'm at that point where I'm starting to, I still feel the fear, so I don't feel fully past it, but I feel like I'm starting to like get over the top of that hump of being like, uh, I get it. Like I don't have to be afraid of people's rejection. You know what I mean? Which sounds sort of weird, but like it's cool because that alone is helping me actually want to do this storytelling stuff that I'm now really excited to learn. Because that format, I'm like, okay, that actually really feels values aligned, like courageous self-expression, contribution, and in that courage to share openly in a real way. Like that's exactly what this is for me, for what we're doing. Like that's why this feels so good and aligned, is that I feel like we're really contributing because we're sharing and we're being real and we're looking at questions that my guess many people come up against. And so anyway, I share that because I really, it matters to me that people don't look it's weird because it's not that I need people to look at me in a certain way, because I know that my actions and my values that drive those actions are what ultimately come through. So I'm not talking short term. I know big picture, but anyway, where I'm going with this is that it's helping me want to be out there more. It's less of a torturous thought, the idea of getting on a stage and being a public speaker. It's way less torturous to think about doing a Facebook Live. It's, like, you know what I mean? Like I have more energy as a result, literal physical energy to say yes to a networking breakfast on Tuesday, even though I fly to Los Angeles at 5 a.m. the next day. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I do.
if we go back to the bodily, like the body and the response we get in our body when we release that stuff, when that decision is made, like, and again, obviously I'm still clarifying that decision, but like the fact that I'm feeling less and less afraid in being out there and how people look at that, then that's like giving me literal energy. So my balance is starting to, I don't need as much introverted time. I can be out there a little bit more and being of service in that way, I believe. So anyway, sort of a long ramble, but.
What you made me think about was the object in motion tends to stay in motion. When we're making choices, when we're taking risks, when we're making decisions, we're like, I'm going to try this or I'm going to do that, whether they're right or wrong. This is going back to the same piece. we're making movement, we're creating movement,
Yeah.
and I think that that's the big piece is like, okay, I feel more motivated to try again, even if I failed, than if I just don't try, I
Yeah.
lose motivation to try at all, and it feeds one way or the other. The more risks you take, the more attempts you make, or the more, misdirected steps that you might put out there, the more willing and driven that you are or available you are to do it again, to take
Yeah.
another risk. And that's really what it's about. It's about staying in motion. I'm feeling this with the physical body as well, is that,
Yeah.
okay, so I had an injury recently, and it slowed me down for a little while. So I had some knee surgery and I'm not moving as much. I get on the couch for a long time because I got to be really still.
Yeah.
And so the body goes into this state of sedation,
Yep.
and sedentary, not moving. And it's so hard to get moving again afterwards. Like, I really
Yeah.
want to move. I'm motivated to do so. I'm tired of sitting still because I know I like to stay active. But the physical form has taken on the time of being still, of doing less. And so the next cycle to start the phase over again of making movement is not going to have the frequency of what it had before that happened. It's a slower start, and the
Yeah.
wave down is longer again. And then
Gotcha.
it takes longer to get this phase back up. And then worse is if you hit another hurdle, so I'm like, oh, something else slowed me down. I got a cold. I'm sick for a week,
Right.
and now I have to overcome this physical state of being of, here's where I felt like I wanted my energy going this way, and now my physical energy is actually going this way.
Yep.
And we got to ride these waves and let them carry us slowly back onto the frequency that we're looking to attain.
Right.
I think a big piece of that is having in mind some kind of like where you want your range to exist. So
Mm.
think about it like, if you're playing an instrument, if you were strumming a chord, like, or if you were an artist and you were painting a picture, it would be like, what color are you going to put on your brush? If you're a musician, it's like, what sound are you going to make when you pluck the string? You
Yeah.
get to choose, right? This is our
Well,
life. So we get to choose whatever type of circumstances we want. So you can think about it any way. I think, okay, if I'm going to paint a picture, what color would I start with? Or what color do I want the picture to be, like the main frame of this? And we just make choices, we just try and we just pick
yeah.
one. And eventually we get a spectrum that we like, that we feel like we're happy with, or that works for us.
Yeah.
And whether it's you know plucking the keys on a piano, or whether it's painting a picture, or whether it's choosing to interact with people in your life, or put actions in your life that are going to frame up experiences, like today I'm going to go exercise with a friend, or today I'm going to talk with Mel, and we're going to get to go on about things that are motivating, exciting to me, and put me in an energetic wavelength that
Yep.
feels purple, and
Totally.
that's going to get me on the track that I want to be on, because I'm tired of being gray,
Yeah.
those, I don't know, it's just
No, that's so relevant. It's so relevant because that's the thing. It's like when you don't know what to do, that's such a great just little tip is like, well, what can you recall brings you brings you into a positive energy state? Like what's something you can do? Who's someone you can talk to? What's something that you're working on that excites you, where one little piece of progress will, make you feel better because there's an uptick of energy there. And that's the thing. Like I say that a lot, but like the mental stuff, because I work a lot with the brain. I talk to people on the phone, and it's amazing the literal physical energy that comes when we release a fear, when we get on and that's why action is so critical, is that if we don't, because it's one thing to be like, how do I actually get through a fear mentally before I don't have any reason to believe that, if people are stuck in that spot. That's the whole point. Like that's the whole why action helps so much, is it gives us evidence that we can get through that type of fear. Like we can, it might not be like completely releasing, all at one time. It might be incremental over time, But like, and that's, again, I go back to the Facebook Live example only because it's so present right now, but it's incrementally, my fear has been diffusing. Just
Yeah.
because I did a Facebook Live once doesn't mean I'm like, oh, I can do it. Yeah. I was like, okay, survived that one,
Yeah.
whereas yesterday I did one and I was very relaxed. I actually was like, okay, this is of service. I'm starting to really feel it in the other way. I'm starting to really believe that I'm going to be just fine, that not only am I going to be just fine, I'm actually doing people and myself a high service in doing this. So like, that's the mindset shift for that's coming slowly. But without me doing it, it would never happen.
And it's going to
Period.
waver. It's going to waver, right? Like even when
Yeah,
you get more and more practice, there's going to be times when you're like, oh, I'm doing great. This is going awesome. And then some days you're going to just fumble and it's not going to
totally.
go great. And your words aren't going to come right. Thoughts aren't going to go right. Technical error problems are going to occur and you'll be disappointed with what you did, but it'll still be action. It'll still be motion and it'll still be moving you down. At least, like you said, you'll know the things you don't want it to be the next time, or it'll help drive the decisions that you make towards other projects or other parts of your life.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I've been a big fan of a podcast called The Art of Charm for a long time. And one of the biggest reasons I was a fan of the show is because of the host. His name is Jordan Harbinger. He's just really great at interviewing, and the interviews bring out just all of these actionable insights from just all these super interesting, high achieving people. And I just love the show. So anyway, recently he broke with The Art of Charm and started his own show. And it sounded like, I don't know the story. I don't know him personally other than just having exchanged a few emails here and there. And he's been very generous in terms of just ways that he can help me when that was appropriate. Like actually I'm wearing this shirt, Hero of Public Speaking. Like I got a free ticket, for example, to this. This was not intentional. But I went to this event free of charge last, like, I don't know, handful of months ago because of his generosity. So I bring this up because now he's in this tougher time. Like the new show there, if you listen to it, it's still super high level content, but instead of having a decade plus worth of audience that they've earned and all this audio, he's now like, holy shit, I have to start from scratch. Like, and he's in this fear experience and you can hear it, and he's still out there. He's still out there. And so as someone who's been sort of a longtime fan for like the last 4 years and really gotten so much from the shows and the interviews that he's done, there's a part of me that is like, yes, like I so respect you for still being out there, still trying, still being in action. He could easily just be like, I'm going to sit for 6 months, not do anything, but that's not what they're doing. They're like really out there. And as someone who maybe I had on a pedestal in terms of like, oh, he's just a really, with it person, has it all together, or like, super successful network full of amazing individuals and super strong. And now just being able to be with them and the team in that process, it's just inspiring. And I appreciate that. So that supports me to be here in this type of way myself. You know what I mean? So it's all so connected. It's all, I don't know, it's all awesome.
Certainly is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, I say we cut it.
Yep.
I say that's good shit. So good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you cut off. What did you say?
No, it's been great talking with you. I really look forward to having this chance to just kind of banter every week, to be able to kind of bring what's in our minds into the foreground of our thoughts and be able to share it with others, to bring this, community open sharing concept out there. I feel like it's important to me as I move through the later stages of life to be more and more present in my experience, being available to others. I feel like the mission that I've set out for myself is one that is worthy of sharing, that people are going to find value in it, that's going to help guide their decision making, their choices, their mentor the decisions they have ahead of them, goal setting, whatever it may be. So that's my goal. That's what I want to do.
I love it.
My new goals. Yeah.
I want to say one more thing just because it's so relevant to that is like, remember when Luke did the no parachute jump and he landed in the net? So most people will know this, like our friend Luke Akins, you know Luke, right?
Yeah, he's
so
good.
Luke Akins did this jump where he landed he jumped out of a fucking airplane with no parachute and landed in a net. And I made a video with commenting on that. And given we touched on like physical risk and stuff like that, I, in that video, state that would I do that? Because I believe like, oh, he mitigated the risk and he made it such that he would achieve it. Like, I don't think he's some crazy, want to kill himself.
Highly calculated. Yeah.
He's not like that. And so I was like, and given it's theoretically not risky, would I do it? No chance. I would never do it because I have no desire to risk myself physically like that. But what I do have a desire to do and a calling to do is to risk myself emotionally. And like, so just to support what you've said, like, I feel like that type of risk still can feel similarly. And I'm glad we're doing this project. It's awesome.
Me too.
Yeah. Right on. Thank you everyone for being a part of the Trust the Journey family. Another episode is in the books. Please tweet, share, post, email, whatever, however you're inspired, to share this with anybody you think the show might help.
Join us next time for episode 3, where we'll be talking about training, expanding on the journey, and success through failure.
Thank you all truly for being with us. We love you. Remember, keep laughing, keep loving, and keep trusting the journey.